Greetings and welcome to the Department of Tangents podcast. If you've listened before, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, thanks for dropping in. So you've heard of Christmas in July. This is more like July in Christmas, or August in Christmas. I went to Boston Comic-Con in August and talked to a lot of great artists and creators, but the episode kept getting delayed and pushed back by other interviews I wanted to get out at specific times. So this will be a two-part look back at Boston Comic-Con 2017. I know you'll enjoy hearing about the work of the artists I spoke to, and I hope you'll look them up. Now, you may have noticed it's been a while since the last episode. There's a reason for that. I had been doing all the work for the podcast the week that podcast was released, and realized in November that method of working is just not sustainable for me. I got sick for a couple weeks in November and couldn't do a decent voiceover, and that forced me to take a break. So I decided to extend that break so I could record more episodes and work ahead. So in 2018, I will never miss an episode. I've done a lot of interviews and I'm working on more. You'll be hearing new episodes featuring Matt York, The Lowest Pair, The Len Price 3, and there's more I'll tell you about once I've nailed them down. Plus, the site will look a little bit different in 2018, so please check that out at departmentoftangents.com. I'll still be featuring a new song or comedy set from a new album on each episode, and I'll have plenty of interviews with musicians, comedians, filmmakers, writers, and more, drinking from the fire hose of comedy, music, and horror. For this episode, I have a song from Van Wyck called An Average Woman, the title track from her upcoming album, which is out in January. So this episode, part one, I have Gordin McAlpin, creator of the Multiplex Web comic, Michael Denison of the Bea Arthur-centric Bea A, and a collage artist who makes pop culture scenes out of action figures and old television sets. It was a booth I had to stop and talk to the guy. We start out with Ben Goldsmith and Kayla Velario, the writers and artists and creators of the Séance Room comic. Here we go. Ben Goldsmith and Kayla Velario?
Yes.
Look at him go. I think that's the first time we've done a podcast where nailed it. Yeah.
I've had like
it makes me happy. I just did an interview where I mentioned the fact that I've gotten names wrong so frequently.
Oh, good. So we've now counteracted your fear from earlier.
Yes.
Great.
Now I'm feeling a bit more confident.
Great.
The artist and writer and creators behind the Séance Room.
Yep.
That's
right.
Would you like to explain what the Séance Room, the comic, the Séance Room?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll give you that same pitch I gave you earlier. It's kind of tricky because, we at the convention, do people who listen to this, they know, like, we're at conventions,
I would have mentioned that it's the Boston Comic-Con edition of...
Great, yeah. So at the conventions, it's tricky because when people come by, I'm grabbing them in from nothing and just saying, like, hey, you want to see something cool? And I'm just a stranger, and I'm 6'2",
right.
280, so it's like, okay, large man, I will come over. And, hi, guys. Hey, let us know if you want to take a look at anything. Josh, sorry, hold on 1 second. Josh, you want to help these guys out?
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. So, just making sure we get the extra sales in today before the end of the day. So you call people over, and the pitch that you give them is sometimes different than, like, if Nick sits down with us and, like, we know you now a little bit, and I feel very silly giving you the exact. But what I'll tell the listeners here is that we have a comic book where the gentleman who runs this mansion has trapped 6 ghosts. Each ghost represents a different fear. So, for instance, like a conductor of trains represents time. A little boy from the Gothic period who has his head in his hands represents death. And each one ghost comes to life depending on who ends up in the seance room and forces the person to face their own fear or insecurity, and it always goes too far. That's the point, right? Like those great old episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Because what you want is whatever point I'm trying to make per comic, you want somewhere a little closer to from where the end is. Like, we push people too far, so they're like, oh, well, not that far, but I saw what you meant back on page, 19 of 22, which is what you want. So yeah, that's what we do mostly with the comic book there. And Kayla Velario, who's the artist on this one, she has she hates when I say this, but she's like the female Alex Ross. She has this very strong painter style, beautiful. We have the magician posters from the 1920s and the 1930s, and even the 10s. That's the aesthetic that we have from our book. So really these very moody, dark colors, wonderful stuff.
I think it's because I'm moody, and that's really the only reason it's like that. I always got that in school. It's like your work and your paintings are always a little too dark on the valleys. They're like, it's very moody. It's nice, but it's moody. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, that's what I'm good at.
There's your lesson for the kids at home. Keep doing what you love, because eventually that's the thing that's going to get you on Nick's podcast.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, baby.
Did that?
Mom, I did it.
Did that reinforcement push you further into what you were doing?
Honestly, like, it just helped me recognize what I was doing, and then just learn to branch out a little bit more and do things that I wasn't comfortable doing, because at the end of the day, I know that the work for myself can just be whatever I want, and I know I can always revert to that. But it also kind of forces you, like, if you take that criticism, just try something new, you know, and it doesn't hurt, because I'm like, you can go back doing the same old, wait, can I curse?
Yeah.
You can do the same old shit whenever you want, you know, and we always know we can do that, but trying new things is always going to be a little harder and a lot more challenging anyway. So I'm like, took it with a grain of salt, did new stuff, realized it wasn't for me, went to back to the same old thing, but it's been working out. I think it's been working out.
Is this your first project together?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
How did you come together to do this?
So I met Kayla at the now defunct special edition in New York City, the Comic-Con they did during the summer. That was sort of the sister con to the big old behemoth of New York Comic-Con. Kayla had a table there, and I was immediately taken by this print of Catwoman that she did. So I came over to talk to them. We kind of became friends. I lived in the city at the time. I've since moved out back to Boston, and I'm from here originally. And when I finally got in with Source Point Press, I said, I called up Kayla. I said, hey, listen, we got a thing. We want to be a part of this. And ever since then, Kayla and I have been on the road with them. They take care of us. They pay for our table. They put us up in hotels. Like, they really do take great care of us. And all they ask in return is that we make sure we stop every podcaster we can possibly see. But I'll tell you, fun ending to that story. And this is not just saying this hokily. Like, the poster that I bought from her that day is still hanging up in my room to this day. That Catwoman.
And is it Source Point Press? That's the name of the...
So Source Point Press does all indie horror and sci-fi. We got a couple projects coming out, like Monstrous by Greg Wright just got picked up as a multi-million-dollar movie in Hollywood. Rotten Tail by David Hayes actually just finished production. And it'll be debuting on the Sci-Fi Network. It's got Corin Nemec from Stargate, and he's the main character, the titular Rotten Tail. Holliston, the show Adam Green from Hatchet. We do his graphic novel, so there's a little bit. Billy Bob Thornton, we just picked up his band's comic book. So there's like a lot of stuff where we got our hands in some pots that are going to get us propelled, so that when that Séance Room, movie comes out on Netflix.
You're still pitching that?
Working
That's
on
wishful
it.
thinking.
Well, it seems like it's very important to have support like Source Point gives you.
Of course.
Because, you look around, there are hundreds of people trying to get people's attention here today. And like you said, it's grabbing people. I see at these Comic-Cons, walking around the Artists Row, frequently you'll see some people who look a little disheartened, especially by day 3.
Yeah.
And then people are just sort of walking by. It seems like, do you feel that pressure to leap out and grab somebody and talk to them?
First of all, that's a really great assessment and a really great question. I feel that pressure just personally in terms of wanting to succeed. I don't think that pressure comes from any sort of stimulus that's happening with the other creators. Like, I don't look at other guys and go, well, he's not doing it, so I should. It's just an internal, personal thing that probably is the reason I'm here with Source Point and talking to you in the first place, right? So there's someone dropped their binky. Oh no.
Who knows what's on this floor?
I was going to say there's no 5-second rule at a con. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like that sort of like overly optimistic person to begin with. But when it comes down to it, too, the truth is between Kayla and I, what we do is legitimately good. And I even if we have a rough day that day, it doesn't mean that it's not still really good. You know, so I kind of have that nice baseline of self-confidence there, I guess. Yeah.
And you're doing inking and sketching while we're talking.
Yeah, sorry, I have this commission. Melisandre from Game of Thrones. This girl's sketchbook is actually really neat. You might want to flip through it a little bit. But she has gone around different conventions and having artists draw strong women in literature. And then I asked her, I was like, I know this is kind of corny, but do you watch Game of Thrones? She's like, yeah. And I was like, do you have anyone from the show on here? Because I'm really about that because I'm excited about today's episode. And she's like, I have a Cersei, I have someone else. She's like, I was like, you have a Melisandre? She's like, no. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm about it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on now.
And another thing Kayla just finished. Oh, sorry, Kayla, I didn't mean to cut you off. Another thing Kayla just finished is she just donated her Emma Frost piece that she's been working on to Bob Allman's Inkwell Awards, which is the industry awards they're creating to honor inkers in the industry.
Yeah,
so yeah. You can find some of her pieces up, her new piece from Emma Frost up there.
Are you more of an inker or more of a penciler? I've never actually delved into
process stuff like that.
That sort of process behind the comic.
So it's really funny because when Ben bought that print from me, I had no interest in doing sequential art. Mostly because my big thing was I've always wanted to be a cover artist, and that's it. But that's not something you just get into. It's very rare that happens. Usually, for the most part, they're going to ask you to, like, well, can you start doing sequential? How do you ink? Like, how do you do this, and that? Like, we might want to put you on that first before we even get you into covers. So that was already, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not disheartening, but already more so annoying, if anything. Because I'm like, I'm really excited to do this one thing. Now there's extra steps in the middle that I never wanted to do in the first place. So that was already a little irritating. But, you know, Ben called me up for this project, and I was like, it's a really unique opportunity because I know I can choose the way I do everything, like down to the cover. I pencil and ink things, and then I also do all the digital color on it. I have complete control of all of those things, which typically, like, usually, like, maybe the person who pencils something also inks it. Sometimes it's like a 3 or 4 person process aside from the cover, you know, and it's very rare that, like, you, one, have to do all 3, or 2, you get to do all 3. Because some people want to be able to do everything, and it is just time consuming. But that was the thing, like, this whole thing was kind of a challenge in itself, because I'm like, I'm doing sequential work, which I never thought I would like or want to do or be good at. And then after giving it a shot and, like, doing a lot of trial by error, and, like, it's all been this one big learning curve, I'm like, you know what, I don't know what I thought before. I'm like, I can do it, you know? So then the project moved forward and stuff like that. And it's just a monster pile of work. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like, it is just a lot to tack on, and it's just a matter of being very patient with it. But for the most part, I'm like, it is a labor of love, but it's not as awful as I thought it would be. Because I was like, man, this is going to take forever. I'm never going to get anything done. It's going to look like crap. But no, it turned out fine. You know, and I'm really happy with what we both came up with.
Well, how do you work together as far as a writer and artist?
Really well.
I mean, how does it?
Well,
how does it?
Process-wise, Ben has sent me a ton of sample scripts, and I basically picked and choose which ones I wanted to do. This one stuck with me the most, mostly because it was one of the first scripts that he sent me, and I felt like it would only be appropriate to do one of the early scripts he sent me. Like, it would just make the most sense. And then from that point on, then we'll just pick and choose what we do. And honestly, it's about making sure each story focuses on a different ghost, a different kind of, like, point, you know, and then going from there. So, like, I will read through the script, thumbnail things page by page as I go. I'm like, because it's just me, I just go one page at a time, and I don't worry about having to, like, finish everything at once and then send off to someone else. I can kind of work at my own pace, and then just, like, going through. And it's really convenient because since we've known each other a while, I'm like, I can just call him up or text him and be like, so this is one thing on page 4, panel blah blah blah, it makes no sense. Like,
I love that you do that, because it makes it makes it so much easier. I mean, when you're writing things, sometimes you get too involved in it and you kind of forget one or two things. So to have someone outside, I mean, the other thing too is at the end of the day, like I trust Kayla and her judgment because I've known her for a while, and I was a fan of her before I was working with her. So there's with that base, I just go okay, as opposed to, well, Kayla, I don't know if you really get panel 2. Like, yeah, she gets panel 2, and she gets why it sucked, because she knows. So that helps a lot too. I mean, really just working with people you trust and believe in is a huge thing.
But frame by frame, is there a negotiation there of, the dialogue should be represented this particular way or this should be out?
It really just depends.
Yeah, sometimes if I really want something specific, oh, hey, what's going on, man?
Sorry about that. Honestly, it really just depends on a very panel by panel kind of thing, because there have been moments, especially where with this first one, where I've told Ben, I was like, listen, dude, I'm starting to find a lot of little things with dialogue, things that kind of, like, I found like little mini loopholes in like the story, and I was like, listen, we gotta sit down, go page by page on what's left, because by it was maybe like a third into the book, I was like, listen, that third's done. However, moving forward, I'm like, let's sit down, go through each page. I have notes that I've already made before this call, like, we need to sit down and go over this stuff, because I'm like, I almost played like a editor for the most part, like as I was illustrating, because like at the end of the day, it's a story he wrote a long time ago that we're just getting to now. There's a lot of like the way he kind of does things now is, of course, naturally going to be very different from what he did a couple years ago. So then it's just like going through that, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you writing? Like, I don't understand this, and that. And he's like, oh man, he's like, you can tell this is an old script, and I'm like, yeah, I can tell it's an old script.
Does that work both ways as far as what you're creating?
Yeah, I mean, there's things where he's been like, oh, I'm concerned about how this looks like in this page here. This was actually supposed to have a little more movement, and, I will go back and fix it. Also, like, for the most part, he's been pretty open with a lot of suggestions I've made or the way I've approached things. He's been pretty happy with it, so I'm like, hey, as long as he's happy with it, then it's less stuff I have to worry about. So, I mean, yeah, I'm always open for him giving me the criticism. It's just like,
did you just catch my old man noise as I sat down on the microphone?
I don't know. I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? All right, good.
I make those a lot. There's a great local comic, Tony V. Do you know Tony?
I do, actually. Yeah.
He has the routine about sitting down and those last few inches being a free fall, and how that's when you can't guide yourself down to the seat. That's when things are kind of going downhill. My apologies to Tony. I just butchered the premise of that joke.
So don't you love butchering like great material? I do that all the time.
I try to step away from that. That's what in any sort of reviewing a comedy show. It's tough. You don't want to necessarily give away a punchline, but you kind of have to.
Right.
And unless I try not to.
It's like, how do you do a spoiler-free comedy review? That's tricky.
You can't really, but sometimes it's just you'll mention the concept. Somebody dealt with this, and this was sort of his point of view on it. Or if I'm always writing I'm always trying to write down a complete joke if I have to put something in the text of a review.
Yeah. Do you do verbatim probably too?
If I'm doing a joke, if I'm writing a joke about a joke somebody else, it's a tough thing to convey.
Any sort of review of an art is a tough thing to convey. Even reviewing comics is tough, because how many times do you talk about the line work? Like, you can only say the same shit so many times,
Right.
But yeah, if I could make a point about getting back to the working together stuff. The other thing that I did early on, if a writer is listening and they want to do their own thing, I wrote, by the time I even got to Kayla, I already had 9 issues written. And of course, we're not going to make those 9 issues, but it's just having the options, And I'm not talking about like concepts where I called her up and just rambled like an asshole to her. I had 9 22-page, paneled out, full dialogue scripts that I sent to her. We've since written more because it's just better to have the options so when we choose which ones we do. And because it is each issue is a standalone, I might have said that earlier, but each issue is a complete story, so we don't have to go in any order. it just actually ended up working out that the first one we did was, in fact, the first one that I wrote when I was living back in Los Angeles.
Yeah, she mentioned that you wound up going back together and editing certain aspects of the story as you went through.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that too is, when you write the first one, you're not really, most of the time you don't have your mind set on the ninth one.
Right.
So once you kind of get an idea of where things are going, then it changes a little bit. But I'd say in general, not too terrible much changed in terms of the concept. Like, it wasn't like...
No. It was just like little bits of dialogue that I didn't think felt right, or just the order of certain panels. Some of them were a little too spread out. Some of them were a little like cluttered. So it was just like making sure that the book itself and the flow of it was paced well too. Not just dialogue and what's happening, but the way you're viewing it and how many things you're seeing at once, so that like things really stick where they need to. That was about it.
So will you wind up working together again past the Séance Room, do you think?
I would love to. I just have to make sure I get this girl paid. She deserves it. I mean, everything changes depending on what you're working on, but let me just leave it at this. You should be lucky enough to work with Kayla Velario once, let alone twice.
And is it just issue number 1 that's out at this point?
Yep, just issue number 1. We are in the process of number 2, but that does not mean that if you need your horror fix settled, you can't go to the SourcePoint Press website and go see all of the amazing independent horror and sci-fi that SourcePoint has to offer.
Okay, and did you say the website?
www.sourcepointpress.com.
Right,
That's
and when does number 2 come out?
Certainly by the
spring
time...
next year.
Yep, by the time we see you next year, Nick.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a second issue for the next Boston Comic Con.
All right,
so go to www.seanceroomcomic.com. You can find Kayla on Instagram at
Velario_art.
And you can find me at Mr. Ben AU.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
We appreciate it. Cool. So I'm here again at Boston Comic Con with Gordin McAlpin. I think I butchered that. I'll start again. All right. I'm here at Boston Comic Con with Gordin McAlpin, creator. Are you also the artist?
Yes.
Of Multiplex. Would you like to explain what your comic is?
Sure. Well, Multiplex is an online comic about a bunch of kids that work in a movie theater. It's a lot of movie jokes, movie commentary, a little slice of life teen drama, but it's kind of like a sitcom style approach to a workplace comedy that just happens to be a comic strip. It ran from 2005, and it just wrapped in April, I think, of this year. So there's 12 years of archives on the website, which is multiplexcomic.com. And there are currently three print volumes available as well that all have a little extra new material in them.
And tell us a bit about the characters.
Okay.
What people expect?
The two main characters are Kurt and Jason. Kurt is kind of a lowbrow horror buff, and his friend Jason is kind of this movie snob, sort of angry a lot. I'm trying to think of a PG way to say it. Jerkass? Is Jerkass radio friendly?
It's a podcast.
Oh,
so
okay.
You can
he's an asshole.
Yeah, you can say asshole. Asshole is fine.
Yeah.
There are worse things in this world right now than saying the word asshole.
But yeah, so I kind of use Jason and Kurt as kind of like both sides of the movie fan spectrum. So I get to talk a lot about not just the movies themselves, but how we talk about and how we consume movies. It was kind of just, Multiplex is kind of my forum for talking about movies in any way that I could think of. Obviously the movies themselves, fandom, movie theaters as an industry. Later on in the series, it kind of takes on some kind of movie theater focus, like with them becoming managers and dealing with the chain that owns their theater and stuff like that. So, but it is still a comedy, I swear.
Right. Have you yourself had experience working in a movie theater? What's your...
No, Kurt, however, is based on a buddy of mine, Kurt, who worked at a movie theater for a number of years. I hung out with him at that theater, which was the Will and Olds 14 Theater in Peoria, Illinois, where I grew up. But no, I've mostly worked as a designer and illustrator in my adult life. When I was younger, I worked at bars and coffee shops, and there's a lot of similarities between pretty much any service industry job, movie theaters, waiting tables, bartending. You just have a slightly different public going into each of them. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities to it.
So like you would have to have a love of movies to write this.
Yeah. No, I love movies, and that's kind of where my interest in Multiplex started, is just coming at it from the movie end of things. But then, the characters kind of take on a life of their own and start asserting themselves in ways and pulling the story in directions that you don't necessarily anticipate.
Do you remember where your love of movies started? Was there a particular movie that did it for you?
I always remember loving movies. So I'm 42, and I remember being, 5 or 6 years old maybe, and seeing Gandhi on the TV, a trailer for it on the TV, and being like, I need to see this.
That's heavy
stuff. And
for
my
a kid.
Parents are like, what? But I think what appealed to me was the visuals, which, since it was set in India, I'd never seen anything like that movie. To me, it looked like a science fiction movie.
Well, yeah, if Dune was out around the same time,
and
Gandhi would look like a superhero to somebody in Western culture who'd never seen.
I was 5 too, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I loved the Dune movie. As a kid, I didn't understand it, and apparently there's not much to understand.
There's probably not a ton of difference, I say, between Gandhi and Dr. Fate to a 5-year-old kid.
To a 5-year-old kid, yeah, exactly. I've always kind of loved movies. I don't know. I mean, it just kind of. I guess when it really started solidifying for me that I loved movies as a medium, more so than just like nerd movies, was when I was in college. I didn't have cable, and so I would just rent movies all the time. And after a while, you'd start being like, well, I've rented all of these. I guess let's try some Japanese samurai movies. And so that was my television. I just rented anything and everything that looked good. 2 hours isn't that big of a time investment, you know. So after a while, you just kind of gravitated towards stuff that interested you, and find the stuff that really resonates with you. And for me, that was like Japanese films. I love Peter Weir. I could go on about that one a little too long, probably.
And you grew up in Peoria, you said?
Yeah, I lived in Peoria until I was about 24, 25. Then I moved to Chicago, lived there for 10 years. That's when Multiplex started. I lived in the Twin Cities in Minnesota for about 5 years while I was getting my graduate degree. And then I moved here to Somerville about a year ago.
How conscious is that city about being the place, about Peoria I'm talking about, being the place where Richard Pryor grew up?
Well, I probably got exposed to a little bit more of that Richard Pryor pride because I went to Peoria High School, which is where he went to high school, if I remember correctly. There was a lot of it in the 80s for sure. When JoJo Dance with Your Life Is Calling or whatever was filmed there, and there was a lot of it. I don't know about anymore, but he's one of the greats in stand-up. So yeah, I think we're pretty proud of that. As claims to fame go, it's a good one.
It's a good one,
Yeah. And he hasn't, he never got tarnished by, the drug use, but he never got tarnished by like Bill Cosby or some of these other comedians and celebrities that completely destroy their legacy in their older years.
Right. The work didn't necessarily suffer.
No.
For it, at least the best of the work. There's a lot of stuff he did that people just forget.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, he never destroyed his legacy. And he was hugely influential.
Tried. God did he try?
Yeah.
I was just curious because I know the story of his growing up, and I've only been to Peoria once in my life.
Right.
When I was considering going to Bradley College.
That's where I went to college.
Oh,
my dad worked there. He was a computer science professor. He's retired now. But yeah, I went to Bradley University. Majored, had a double major in writing and drawing. So that was as close as I could get to a comics degree at that time. This was, like the mid-'90s. Just old enough for that.
It was a nice campus. I saw.
Yeah.
I went to see a play, though I don't remember what it was, and I attended the saddest toga party ever in the history. My father drove me out there. They separated us. They had its own separate thing, and they put me with students in a frat house. And it was the first time I'd seen an actual toga party. I'm a senior in high school at this point, and it was just sort of a dance, and then afterwards, like 5 dudes in togas complaining about the fact that they didn't get laid. And I'm like, maybe this isn't the college for me. Maybe this isn't the best representation.
Yeah.
These guys.
Well, my dad worked there, so I was sort of trapped. I like to say I got what I paid for, which isn't very much.
I wound up going to state school, which was great as well. But
right on.
No,
which one?
University of Buffalo.
Oh, okay. I was thinking in Illinois. Guess
no.
So no, it was a good enough school. I'm glad I got out of Peoria though. Peoria, it's fine. It's sort of maybe a better place to raise your kids than to be raised as a kid, I think.
I think that's actually the city slogan, Peoria. It's fine. It's not to bag on Peoria. To be clear, it seemed lovely when I was there. It was just this party that seemed very sad to me.
No, it's fine.
Peoria, it's fine.
Yeah.
So what's happening next with Multiplex?
Well, right now I'm working on an animated short based on Multiplex. It's called Multiplex 10 instead of Multiplex for various convoluted reasons. But that should come out sometime in the fall. Right now I'm dealing with a shoulder injury, rotator cuff injury, so that kind of slowed down production a little bit. But because I'm animating it almost entirely on my own. So that will come out hopefully in the fall, October, fingers crossed. But at some point there is a board game being developed based on Multiplex 10 as well. That I don't know exactly what's going on with that. But
somebody else is developing that?
They're developing the game based on a concept that I developed in grad school. They've kind of ran in their own direction with it, and as long as it's funny and I'm doing all the drawing for it, I'm fine with that. As long as if it's fun, I'm fine with that.
Right.
So
it's fine.
Yeah.
And where do people find out more information?
Well, you could go to multiplex10.com for the animated short, multiplexcomic.com, or just follow me on Twitter. I'm G McAlpin, GMCALPIN on Twitter. So those are all good places. I'm easily Googleable.
Okay.
You can't say Googleable very well, but
apparently not.
No, I can't. But yeah. Multiplex shows up pretty high on the Google search results.
All right, thank you for speaking.
Thank you.
There we go.
All right, I'm here at the Telorama booth at Boston Comic Con with, what is your name?
My name is Edward Laderi.
And you created all of these, let me see if I can describe, there are superhero battles and Game of Thrones battles and all sorts of things happening in different televisions and old monitors.
Yes.
How would you describe that?
It's close. It's an offshoot of like a shadow box style of art. So it's mixed media using action figures, sketch cards, various lighting. Stickers, Rust-Oleum 2X paint, which is the only paint I use on the TVs, and then you can create any kind of action scene that you would like.
And how did you hit upon doing this?
I just was reading a book and I said to myself, boy, I would like to create a scene. It was a steampunk novel, and I says, boy, I would like to make a scene, and that's how I started thinking about making scenes inside old televisions.
And now there's specific shows and specific comics.
If we want a lot of sports figures, I do a lot of like Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and Mookie Betts. But now, like, you can do Superman, you can do Avengers, and so on and so forth.
How has it been today? How was the?
It's been good. A lot of people. I had like 500 cards. I'm like halfway through them. So people, most of my stuff is like on commissions, and then I explain to them how they start out as bases, then they get filled out a little more with the cards and badging, and then they finally go into the TV. With the lights, and then finally with a stand that goes with the whole package.
How do you decide what you want to do?
It just decide, like, if I'm reading a comic book or watch the show.
Do you have any favorites here?
I like my Game of Thrones ones. I'm pretty happy how they turn out, but the Walking Dead ones are pretty good. Just everyone, everyone has a lot of love that I put in them.
What kinds of things do you get as requests and commissions?
A lot of, it's just, it could be anything. It really could. DC Comics, Marvel Comics, movies, anything. You name it, it could be anything.
And as long as you can get the figures to put in the box?
Correct, though I do have friends that will make me custom figures that we can work from there too.
And where do people find out more about this? Do you have a?
I have a little store in Georgetown, Massachusetts, and I don't have a website yet, but my girl's making me do one, so I'll have it on web. I'll have a web page very soon.
Okay, that's Telerama. That's the name.
Yes, it is.
Do you have a Facebook page?
I do have a Facebook page. It's called Boomkin.
Okay.
There's my card.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're at the Bea Day booth at Boston Comic Con. There's a lot more stuff here than there has been in the past.
Yeah, I've been trying to expand. Plus, I want to have something new for people that might be returning from previous years.
And the original concept is Bea Arthur, a different artistic representation of Bea Arthur and or the Golden Girls for each day of the year.
Yep, correct. There's a lot of bad puns. When I mash her up with other pop culture references, like for example, V for Vendetta, we have B for Vendetta, and E.T. would become B.T.
And you've got the coloring book.
Yep, that collects my my more popular ones.
Why Bea Arthur?
I grew up watching the Golden Girls when it aired with my grandmother, and her character, Dorothy, resonated with me, her level of wit and sarcasm. And it just kind of stuck with me, and then one day I woke up and said, I'm going to draw Bea Arthur every day for a year. And here we are.
It seems to have been a good year for you. You've gotten some attention for some of these.
Yeah, the Globe ran a story. Chronicle recently featured me, and President blocked me on Twitter, so that's good.
Well, you've got what's right in front of me here is the Golden Girls with a label as seen in Broad City.
Yeah, well, this particular one, they had sent me a picture of the set because they were going to use it, and everything looked great, but when the episode finally aired, you could only see like the bottom portion of this painting, so that's what the asterisk is for. But I got some more art coming up in the new season next month.
You've gotten noticed on Twitter as well for some of these, correct?
Yep. That's how most of this has kind of spread out into what it's become.
So we've got, what else have we got? We've got B for Vendetta. We can flip through. There's the...
let's see, yeah. We have...
the big posters is the Guns N' Roses Golden Girl.
Yeah, Appetite for Cheesecake. We got instead of Shel Silverstein's A Light in the Attic, we have Betty White in the Attic. What else we got? Mecha Modzilla.
Which is Mod as Mechagodzilla.
We have Bea Arthur as He-Man, otherwise known as B-Man.
That fits very well somehow. That's kind of scary, KFB.
Yeah,
Colonel Sanders. Mod as Colonel Sanders.
The Golden Girls on Easter Island would just be Beaster Island. What else do we have? Zigbee Stardust.
It's a very specific idea. How do you take that and make a living out of it?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a living. We're trying, but there's been the past couple of years. There's been a kind of a Golden Girls renaissance where the show is being, it's still watched today, and there's quite a sizable fan base. There's Funko's making pop figures and action figures, and people are going nuts about them. I just got a Golden Girls Clue game, and so it's the love for the show is still there, and I'm just riding on the coattails.
Well, when you first decided to do this, did you think, well, I've got to do something maybe a little more broad than just Bea Arthur?
No.
I've got to do some sort of other art that I need to...
It kind of started as, because I hadn't been doing anything artistically in a while. And one of the reasons I did this was as like a challenge to myself to get myself back into it. I said if I draw Bea Arthur every day for a year, and for some reason I knew I would stick with it instead of just, and I don't know, it's become this kind of whole thing. And I have this fan base now where, I'm going to edge into new material, but I still have to remember that most of the fans are Golden Girls fans at this point.
Right. What year was the first year you did this?
2013. Yeah.
And that first year you were drawing Bea Arthur every day. Was there a point maybe 30, 40 days in where you thought, what the hell am I doing? Why am I going to keep doing this?
Up until the very first one, I said, I'm not going to do this. And then I did it, and probably, a month in, how am I going to keep coming up with these ideas, for these puns and stuff? I still see it daily, though. I'm adding things. I have a running list, and I add to it every day, so.
Did you get to 365?
Oh, yeah.
After that year, you got one every day?
One every day.
And did you continue doing it after that, or is it
the following year, I did Betty White a day. I did 365 Betty Whites. Then the third year, I went back to Bea, but at the same time, I also did a Rue McClanahan drawing every day. So I was doing 2 a day. Then I took a few months off, and now I'm back in Bea Day 3.
Are you in the third year of Bea Day? What day?
I think today is 67.
67.
So we still have 300 days to go.
Well, do you just wake up in the morning and think about Bea Arthur the first thing? Like, you're eating breakfast, what have I got to do to get another one of these things done?
Usually, yes. Yeah. It's one of the first things I do when I wake up, for the most part.
Do you have to ever research to get an idea? Search around Google and figure out something?
Lately, I'll come up with tomorrow's idea today. I don't know how. That's what I'm going to do tomorrow. It just comes to me, and wake up in the morning and do it.
So there's not a day where it's 11:30 p.m. and you're thinking, I got nothing today.
No.
I got to do something. It's got to be before midnight.
No, I've never had that problem. Not yet, anyways.
Never frantic about it.
We'll see, though. We'll get there.
What have you got planned after Bea Day 3? What's your next?
I'm sort of putting together some ideas for a comic book or a graphic novel that kind of deals with characters like the Golden Girls in a nursing home that are also retired superheroes. And it would be called the Golden Age, and it would refer to when they were superheroes during the Golden Age of comics.
Right.
So I'm kind of putting that together right now.
You have to get around copyrights.
Yeah, well, loosely based. Like maybe maybe Dorothy's character would become Dot or Dolly or something, But and then maybe from there, I can show people that I'm capable of other things,
And where can people find your work?
I'm on Twitter at MikeD33. It's MIKD33, or Instagram, or Facebook for that matter, and or themikedenison.com. Denison spelled with one N, DENISON. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thanks again to Gordin McAlpin, Michael Denison, Ben Goldsmith, Kayla Velario, and the creator of Telerama for speaking with me. And thanks for listening. This was part 1 of my Boston Comic-Con 2017 interview special. Stay tuned this week for part 2. And now, Van Wyck, An Average Woman, the title track off of her debut album, out January 19th. It's a smoldering track depicting a woman giving up everything that's special about herself in service to someone else. It's got the disposition of a Leonard Cohen song to my ears, a certain tragic defiance and vulnerability, and you'll get to hear the whole album in just a few weeks, and you can find out more at vanwyck.nl, vanwyck.nl. This is Van Wyck, An Average Woman.
Some girls build towers and others dig deep, and some pray to angels, some wait and see. Some girls stay quiet, some scream in your face, and some kill their darlings, and some hesitate. And I was an average woman. I tried to do good, and I tried to be kind. And I kept my head above water most of the time. Most of the time. And some girls eat fire, some stick to their guns, some dance on the tables and have all your fun. And some girls have answers, and some retaliate, and some take on oceans, and some take on faith. And I was an average woman. I tried to do good, and I tried to be kind. And I kept my head above water most of the time. Most of the time. And I struggled and failed, and I laughed at your jokes, and I came to your aid when you needed me most. And I screamed like a fury in the dead of the night, and curled up beside you to make right. Some girls build towers others dig deep. Some pray to angels, some wait and see. Some girls build towers, and others dig deep. And some pray to angels, some wait and see. And some girls build towers, and others dig deep. And some pray to angels, some wait and see. And some girls build towers, and others dig deep. And some pray to angels, some wait and see.
Neil Young.